Welcome to the Achievable FINRA and Insurance Podcast. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we have affordable courses for the FINRA SIE, the Series 6, 7, 9, 63, 65, and 66 exams, as well as insurance, life and health, property and casualty, and personal lines exams. We have a 95% or better pass rate for tens of thousands of students for all of our courses, and each achievable course includes everything you need to pass the first time: a full textbook, videos on key topics, thousands of questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, and full length practice exams. You can try it out for free by going to achievable.me. And if you like it, use the code podcast to save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today, we've got Tony Steuer back with us. And Tony, I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. Glad to be back. My name is Tony Steuer. As you just mentioned, I am the author of several books, including Questions and Answers on Life Insurance and the Questions and Answers on Life Insurance Workbook. I'm also the host of the Get Ready Money podcast and have experience as a fee-based insurance consultant.
Great. Yeah, and so today we're going to be talking about the best practices for new life insurance agents. And I think to start, let's just lay the foundation, right? What are just like the basic things, the daily routines or weekly routines that you got to be doing to separate yourself from the pack? What are the basics that you need to master straight out the gate to become a successful agent?
I think the biggest thing that I see not happening is treating it like a profession. Is Yeah, if you're coming in, you're going to be starting off in sales. But that what you need to think of yourself is as a professional advisor. So that's the first thing is the mindset. And as a professional advisor, you want to think about getting your chartered life underwriter, your CLU designation from the American College. Tyler, I don't know if Achievable does anything with the American College, but that is a professional designation. It takes you further than the insurance license. And then you start to become a professional. And then I would say that one of the things you want to do is to make sure you understand the products that you're selling. Because usually when you come into business, the first people you're going to be contacting are those people you know. And, and oftentimes if you're selling them something that you don't really understand or you're not fully versed with, is that can create long time issues. So that's something to think about is to make sure you're fully understanding the products and services. And then you want to come up with a long-term plan. So hopefully you're going to be somewhere where you're going to receive some training, receive a framework. But if you don't, is you want to think about like, okay, a couple of different things is, that hopefully you're going to be in this industry for a while. However, there is a really high turnover rate in the life insurance industry. So you want to be thinking about like, okay, well, how can I make this a long-term career? And part of that is, as I mentioned, by becoming a professional. And that means treating people well and understanding your craft. To become a doctor, you don't become a doctor in 2 years. You have to go to medical school, you have to do a residency, you have to do an internship. And I'm sorry if I get those out of order for any doctors who might be listening to this, anybody coming from the medical field. But you have to go through a series of steps where you're not right away going to medical school one day and then performing the most complex surgeries the next day. There's a curve and a path to where you become a professional. And I would say that's my biggest tip for new people coming into the industry is to think of yourself like a professional and then to create a plan to be a professional.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And I think that within that, there's probably a lot of little things, right? Like it's things like, I don't know, maybe it's make sure that you're adding. I'm just taking examples from my own sales career, so this might not be relevant, but like making sure you're adding 100 new contacts that you're reaching out to every week, or making sure that you're doing all your follow-ups on time, or making sure that you get in at 8 every morning so that you're hitting the phones by 8:30, or like things like that. Is there anything specific that you'd call out as just kind of like a good best practice?
Yeah, again, it's acting like a professional, I mean, that's what you're talking about is you come into the office at a specific time, you work a certain number of hours, you treat it like you're building a business because as an independent insurance agent, you are building a business. And if you're a captive insurance agent, like let's say with New York Life, you are still an independent person building your own business. So you have to think like a business owner. Business owners put in a lot of time. When I first started out, I started working really early and I worked long hours, but that's because I wanted to become dedicated to my craft and I wanted to build a business. And that's what business owners do is they create a business, and to create a business, you have to put time and effort into it. The other thing that I would be thinking about doing is like, what kind of niche can you have? What kind of specialty? My niche became working with other advisors. So I worked first with property and casualty agents, and I worked with employee benefit providers. And then that's where the majority of my clients came from. I didn't have to get my own clients. I had a source of leads. So you have to think about that. It's like, because that's the biggest thing you need, of course, is you need people to talk to. And you can't call people in the phone book anymore. Nobody's going to pick up their phone. I mean, who even talks on their phone? I mean, usually it's texting, and I don't think anybody's going to answer a text from an insurance agent. Go, hey, that's great. Text me about some insurance stuff. That's just not happening. So you have to think about, okay, how am I going to meet people? But most importantly, I would say to think of a niche. So if you have a background, let's say you have a background, like I know a woman who does financial planning for other actors because she was an actress and she found that there weren't really any good financial planners for actresses. So she decided to open a financial planning firm for actresses. I know another fellow who's a financial planner, and again, I'm using financial planner here rather than insurance agent, but it's transferable, who was in the NFL. So his financial planning practice revolves around other professional football players and now other professional athletes. So you do have circles where you have expertise. And so you have to think about that is like, how can I create a niche where I can, you know, get prospects? But again, because this is a niche where you might have connections, you want to honor those connections and treat them well. And I think that's one of the biggest problems I see is people come in the industry and they don't treat their connections well. But your connections are really important, and that's what's going to make you a professional is those people that you can collaborate with and hopefully get referrals from. But at the same point, if you're getting referrals from them, you want to be able to give them referrals as well.
Yeah, I think that it's important to basically start to think about it strategically, right? Essentially, you need to have leads and you need to have some sort of product that makes you at least a little bit more interesting than every other guy. Or like you said, like a niche that you're targeting. And I guess my question to you is what do you think new agents should focus on first? Or what's more important in the first year? Is it that figuring out that niche and building out like your licensure, your licenses or certifications, like you mentioned? Or is it more just trying to get as many sales as possible or build relationships as many as possible? Because in a lot of ways, I understand you obviously in a perfect world want to do both. It's a little bit of, on the one hand, you need to start building relationships now if you want them to blossom in the next couple of years. On the other hand, you don't maybe know which relationships you should be building or like what you have the knowledge to build them properly until you've got a bit more experience. So I'm curious how you think about balancing them.
Well, you need to sell some policies right away to eat. But if that's all you're concentrating on sales, then you're just going to be doing the same thing year after year. You're just going to be chasing the next sale because you're not really going to be moving forward. So that's why you need to think about the architecture of building a practice. And that's the terminology is you're building a practice just like any other professional. So, finding that niche and, yeah, it's hard, but you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So you have to be able to have some sales, but you also do have to be able to create relationships and find your niche, and you have to do it all at once. And that's what I mean. 95% of agents will be out of the business in 5 years. There's a huge churn rate in this industry, and it's because there's not a lot of long-term planning that goes into a life insurance agent's career. And so that's why you have to be able to really think about, like, okay, what niche can I serve? Now, it doesn't mean you can't switch to another niche later on, but you're going to have a natural niche. Let's say it's people who like playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know, because you're a Dungeons and Dragons player. Is you understand people who play Dungeons and Dragons. You probably know a lot of people who play Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, that's probably not the best example. So let's take another example, mechanics. Let's say you know what issues mechanics may be facing, so you can set up, like you talked about, what products might be best for mechanics, and take it from that approach. So you want to be able to think about that, playing the long game at the same time, as you mentioned, is you do need some sales right away. But without the long game, you're always going to be playing the short game, and you're always going to be hustling, and you're going to burn out.
I think that you're touching on one of the things I wanted to ask about, which is like, what are some of the biggest challenges that a new agent is going to face, and how can you avoid being one of the casualties by year five?
Well, I think one of the biggest reasons is that, when you start out, they're all like, call your 100 closest friends, or, solicit your 100 closest friends and family. And because once you get outside that, because you burn through that pretty quickly, is you don't have a plan. And that's why I keep coming back to that, is you need to have a plan for how you're going to market. And does that mean you're going to market to a specific niche like I've been talking about? Are you going to, I don't know, do online webinars? I mean, whatever you're going to do, there's a lot of different things that you can do. Are you going to build a YouTube channel to talk about life insurance? Whatever you think you're going to do, is you have to figure out a plan to actually do something. And just buying leads does not work, because the leads you buy are usually super low quality, or, the leads are being sold to multiple insurance agents. So, you really have to think about how you're going to get more clients and how you're going to grow your client base. And a great way to build it, as I mentioned, is to form relationships with other professionals. Maybe find somebody who's selling auto and home insurance, who needs somebody to sell life insurance to their clients, but your life insurance clients are also going to need auto and homeowners insurance. So people will join, something. You can join the Rotary Club. You could join other service clubs where you're going to meet other professionals. You can join Toastmasters. There's still a lot of entities that you can join where you're going to meet other people in your communities who you can form referral circles with. That's another great way to do it, is, with other people who are dealing with a similar demographic. And so you might have a CPA, you might have an insurance agent, you might have an accountant, you might have an attorney, but you can all work together to serve the same client. And it's an easy way to really grow your business, but grow it in a holistic way. The other thing I would say is to not just sell. So you get a client, you're excited, and you sell them just whatever you're being told to sell them. The other big thing I would say is that you want to look at your client as a long-term client, not just a customer. So you want to take care to sell them the right insurance product rather than the product that's going to get you the most commission, because that's oftentimes what happens. Is, new agents will come in, they'll sell everybody a whole life insurance policy. Nobody will want to talk to them again because they didn't need a whole life insurance policy in the first place. Now, that's not to say the whole life insurance isn't a great product. It has its time and its place, but it's not the right solution for everybody. So that's the other thing I would say for new agents, is to listen to what your clients are looking for and to help them find the right product.
I think it's goes back to kind of what you're saying at the beginning, which is try to take care of and do right by everybody that you're coming into contact with, because hopefully these will become long-term relationships, and you can't really win your trust back. You get
Exactly.
a bit of trust at the beginning and then you earn more over time, but if you screw it up, then it's basically gone. So then my next question is around just like you've spent so much time talking in this interview about how important it is for people to start to build their network and both build their initial book of business, but then also build their like partnership network essentially. And I'm curious, what are the ways that you recommend people do that? You mentioned for the partner network, you mentioned joining clubs. So maybe we can just talk out the partner network thing first, because I feel like, sure, you can join some clubs, but like I've had friends who joined those types of referral network things. And frankly, like a lot of the people that you're asked to refer others to are maybe not the best. And also, once those clubs have one life insurance person, then they can't have a second one. So, are there any other ways that you recommend building out relationships and partnerships?
You know, really being involved in your community and looking at it, but part of it will be dictated by, like I talked about, like what niche you want to serve. And that might be by what interests you, maybe the products, maybe you're somebody who wants to concentrate more on disability insurance than life insurance, whether you want to work with older people or younger people, because that's also another choice, is because, you know, if you're 20 years old, you're going to have a really hard time. 25 years old, you're going to have a hard time working with retired people. You're just not going to be able to
Mhm.
relate to them the same way somebody who's also, you know, 50 or 60 years old, and vice versa. And so you want to take a look at that, and that might help dictate what the best way is to form a relationship. But really, you have to prove that you're of value. If you want to be referable, you have to be somebody who knows what they are doing. And the way that you do that is by building your education and proving that you can provide value. So that's really, so that is the longer term play, because getting a chartered life underwriter designation is going to take you 3 or 4 years. But even while you're doing it, you're still picking up knowledge and you're learning more. So think about it this way: is a very small minority of agents, I don't know what percentage, have CLU designations. And all of them are guys who've been in the business for 5 years, because I think you have to be in the business for a certain number of years before you can get your CLU designation. But even if you're on track to do it, you're much further ahead than everybody else. And so this is not a plug for the American College and the CLU designation, but it does show that, professional education is something that you need to have, because you need to demonstrate that you are a professional. Think about it this way: would you want to buy, a product from somebody who has a designation in a certain area, or would you want to buy it from somebody who just started? Probably you're going to go with a more experienced person who has some kind of education, because you're not going to have the experience from day one, because that's impossible. But what you can have is the attitude of a professional, and you can pick up some education right away.
Yeah. That kind of leads to my next question, which is like when you are in your first year, right? Because you said 95% of people are out by 5 years. So sure, if you stick it out 5 years, then you're in one of those 5%, and you also have your CLU. I think you're like already getting an A in the class. And so I think let's talk about getting there first. How, when you don't have that experience, can you establish trust with clients?
Well, I think that you have to think like a professional. And I keep coming back to this. The biggest thing that I see with insurance agents and financial advisors across the board is that they don't listen to their clients. So the first thing you want to do is, when you meet with a client, is you want to actually listen to them, figure out what problems they're trying to solve, what their goals are, what their vision is. And then, this is a really hard thing for most insurance people, is you want to help them get the product that will actually help them meet their goals. So instead of, you go to a sales meeting and they start talking about XYZ life, and this is the greatest product, and it does this and it does that, but it's not the product that meets your client's needs, then your client is not going to be happy with you later on down the road. So that's the first thing I would say, is to make sure you're listening to your clients, you're asking them what they want to achieve, you're making sure that the product that you're selling them is the right product. So that's the biggest thing I would say to somebody who's new is to take your time and to really get to know your client.
Well, and I think it's not just getting to know your client, but also like actively listening. I think that sort of when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail to a certain extent. And I think that it's a common sort of early salesperson thing to do to just be like, my goal is to sell the product, so I'm going to sell the product. A lot of times, if you're doing your job right, you won't even necessarily sell the product in that linear of a way.
Exactly. And that's really it is, in the financial planning side, there's this whole concept called life planning. And that's really what it's about is, that you start out and you start talking to your clients about what they want to achieve. And the insurance industry's approach has always been, hey, we've got this policy. How much do you want to buy? And then you're trying to sell that policy. So that's the big key is I would say is to not think of yourself as a salesperson, but to think of yourself as somebody who is helping your client find the insurance product that they need. And if you can change that perspective and change that dynamic, that's where I think you can find success right away as a problem solver.
What you'd call a consultative sale, where you're just like, let me help you find what you're looking for, as opposed to trying to tell them that they're looking for something. And yeah, that's probably a good segue into like my next question, which is just what are the common mistakes or issues that new agents make? What are like the big things that you should be aware of and hopefully avoid?
Burning bridges is, selling one product to everybody in their network. The family and friends is, you get excited, you sell that one product, you think it's the best product ever, and you sell it to everybody. And then a year later, 2 years later, a lot of your family and friends wants to get rid of that product. There's a surrender charge, and they're really not happy with you, and you've burned a lot of bridges with your community. So that's something that I've seen happen a lot. Um, so that's one thing is, and again, it gets back to selling the right product that people are actually looking for, but not having a long-term plan is, that, continuous struggle to get new leads is that's why I think it's so important is to figure out, what your system is for getting in front of new people. And then the other thing that I think is the hugest mistake, even a lot of experienced agents make, is not finding value in your existing client base and staying in touch and treating your existing clients well. Staying in touch, just talking to them, seeing if anything new comes up, because so many insurance agents are like, okay, I've sold this person a policy. I'm done with them. They're dead to me. And they never talk to them again. Instead of going back and taking a look and saying, okay, well, I want to form a relationship with my clients as well. That's the other big thing, mistake, advice, whichever way you want to look at it, with your clients as well.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of touching on another thing I wanted to ask about, which is just what perspective or mindset should you have when you're going about this job that is going to benefit you? And it sounds like that is definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, is thinking about it like a long-term job. So in the software industry, there's a term called client lifetime value. And so instead of like, let's say we'll just pick on Dropbox because everybody knows Dropbox, they charge you what, $20 a month or something, to have a Dropbox account. But when Dropbox is looking at you, they're not looking at you as a $20 a month customer. They're looking at, okay, the average person, and I have no clue. So this is just a total wild guess. The average person hangs on their Dropbox account for 5 years. And so, you know, Dropboxes will look at your value and say, so we'll say $20 a month, so $200 a year for 5 years. So Dropbox is looking at you with a client lifetime value of $1,000. So to Dropbox, that's the value of maintaining you as a customer is that they're going to get $1,000, not the first $20. And that's the biggest challenge that I see in the insurance industry. And it works a little bit differently because, yeah, life insurance, most of the commission is paid out in the first year. But if you look at a person's lifetime, a person's going to go through multiple life stages when they're going to need other forms of insurance. They're going to get married. They're going to have kids. They may have grandkids. They may start a business. They may need disability insurance. They may need critical illness insurance. They may need all these other things where you can take a look and you say, okay, well, if I maintain a really good relationship with this client, there may be more insurance here to place. Their spouse may need an insurance policy. Oh, wait, their business partner, they've started a partnership. So their partner also needs a life insurance policy. So if you're looking at your clients as really long-term relationships and asking how can you best continue to serve them, then then you can really start to build a professional business.
Yeah, I think it's also just important. Like you started with the professional business being like the key thing to go into it. And I think that it informs everything that you do. I feel like one of the helpful things for that would probably be having some sort of guidance. Like, how common is it for you to have support within your little branch of whatever company you're at from your manager or something like that? Or is there other mentorship opportunities for people that are looking to get that in this kind of industry?
I'd say it's critical. Is to find a mentor. I don't know if the American College still connects people with mentors. That used to be one outlet. NAIFA has the LUTCF program, which I think may also have a mentorship component to it. So I'd say, take a look at NAIFA. Take a look at the American College, see what programs are available. See what, if you're working for a company like Northwestern Mutual or New York Life, there's probably an established mentorship program within the company. But take advantage of the mentors because you can learn from them and they're going to give you the practical knowledge that you won't get from a book. So you want to also get that practical knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's also just there's so many things probably, at least I found in my life, where it's just there isn't really like a good answer. Like you can Google it and it'll say one way or the other, and it's really up to you at the end of the day. And so having someone to talk through things with can be really helpful. Other than like mentorship, are there any tools or resources that you recommend for people that are trying to learn the business?
That is a great question. So we've talked about industry associations, which I think is huge. They're not as common as they were as they've really shrunk in size. But I would look for other professional organizations that you can join. There are some online organizations and networks, but I would look, one as we talked about is growing as a professional, but also growing as an insurance professional in your education, but really seeing what kind of opportunities are out there for you. But yeah, mentorship is a great.
Great. Yeah, and then my last question is flipping it a little bit. I feel like part if 95% of the people you hire are gone in 5 years, a little bit is on the agency. And so I'm sure there are some agencies that are better than others when it comes to keeping people around and training them up. And I'm curious, what are the things that, let's say, if you're a rep or if you're an agency manager, what are the things that good agencies do that help people stick around and build this into their long term career? And what are the things maybe to avoid if you hear about some, let's say, aggressive sales practices you're going to be required to employ or other things like that?
I would say, really, from my experience, it's all these things that we've been talking about. It's the general agencies that may provide mentorship opportunities that encourage education, that help the agents find the right products to sell, especially in the early days. They provide, I don't know, maybe webinars on different universal life policies or whatever. It's those same things that we talked about is helping the new agents create an entity and a niche so that they can create a business.
Yeah, and just I don't know, be supportive. I'm sure there are a lot of places that probably lean into the churn and burn aspect of it, right? Because I've seen that many times in both financial services and in like tech recruiting and tech sales. Ask about the place you're going to and see if it can go. If like how many people make it to 5 years out of a given 100 people, let's say, like something like that.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Is yeah, and do a test run, to see. But yeah, from the new agent side, is check out what the atmosphere is like, what kind of support you get. Maybe do a trial client with them. Um, whatever you can do to test them out. And check
Yeah.
out, because now we have Google. Google tells you everything, so you can find out anything about any of these agencies or anybody else that you're thinking about working with.
Yeah. Great. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
I think just to wrap up, as we've talked about, is to remember if you want to be perceived as a professional, you need to act as a professional. So that's my real advice to insurance agents, and to treat people with respect as the way you would want to be treated by people that you work with. I think that oftentimes we forget that as salespeople because we get so eager to sell something, or we feel the pressure to sell something, that we may take advantage of the clients by selling a product that doesn't really work the best for them. And that's a short-term gain, but it's not going to create a long-term career for you. So that would be the thing, is remember, are you in this for the short term or the long term?
Great. Thank you so much. This has been Achievable's FINRA and Insurance podcast, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Tony Steuer. And you can try out Achievable's FINRA and Insurance licensing courses for free by going to achievable.me.